Snow White was named for her beauty. Cinderella was a cinder maid scouring fireplaces. The Little Mermaid? A little mermaid. Most fairy tale heroines are named for who they are or what they do. Not Red Riding Hood. Her name comes from what she wears. And that just might point to a disturbing pattern. Blaming women for their clothing. I'm Andy. I analyze mythology and folklore. This is Tantalizing Myths. We're continuing our deep dive into Red Riding Hood. This time we're zooming in on something often overlooked. Fashion. Specifically that iconic red hood. Perrault's version, in French, is Le Petit Chaperon Rouge. Yeah, I can't roll my R's anymore. That translates to Little Red Riding Hood in English, though why it's considered a riding garment is a bit murky. The Brothers Grimm call her Little Red Cap. A Polish and German variant gives us Little Red Hood, skipping the riding part entirely. Ireland offers Red Riding Hood as one word. Austria and Italy bring us Little Red Hat, and intriguingly, there's even Little Golden Hood, a sort of sequel. So across cultures, the name always comes back to the same thing, headwear. Though we often see red in a dramatic cloak and hood, she probably wore something more like a medieval chaperon, a rounded, close-fitting garment that draped over the shoulders. Morgan Donner has a great video on making a medieval hood. I'll link it below. It's likely closer to what the story originally described than those sweeping cloaks you see in storybook art. And if Morgan, or anyone in the Catherine de' Medici Time Travel Society, is watching and wants to do a deep dive on the history of the chaperon, I'd love to link it. Ideal in text, not textiles. But let's get back to the story. Among the major fairy tales, Red Riding Hood stands out. It's the only one where identity is tied entirely to a piece of clothing. Most fairy tale characters are named after how they look or what they do, even if beauty gets recycled a lot. I will dig deeper into why this happens in a Myth U episode on fairy tales. But Red, her name doesn't come from her traits or actions, it comes from her clothes. The text even spells it out. It suited the girl so extremely well that everyone called her Little Red Riding Hood. Cinderella's slipper might be made of glass or gold, but it never becomes her name. Red, though, has no identity outside her outfit. She is her clothing. It consumes her identity. Even though she's described as the prettiest creature who was ever seen, we're told nothing about her features. Instead, the clothing does all the narrative work. What would normally complement a woman's beauty completely replaces it. And here's where it gets interesting. She's wearing red, an obvious eye-catching color. Not just pretty, but provocative. It's what makes her stand out. It draws attention. It makes her visible. And in the logic of the story, it attracts danger. That's where the story echoes something toxic that still lingers today. In the last episode, I talked about how the story, not just the wolf, targets women. And here it targets what they wear. Red's clothing is her identity. It draws the wolf's gaze. And the implication? If she hadn't dressed that way, this wouldn't have happened. That's the same logic used in modern victim blaming, especially around sexual assault. One of the first questions survivors are often asked, "What were you wearing?" It implies, sometimes outright claims, that they brought it on themselves by dressing quote-unquote provocatively. That question's been asked so many times, it's sparked multiple art exhibits. These shows recreate the actual outfits worn by survivors to challenge the myth that clothing invites assault. I've linked to a few of those exhibits in the description, and I want to give a quick shout out to my students because they're the ones who introduced me to these exhibits last semester. Funny enough, it wasn't in relation to Red Riding Hood at all, so thank you to my composition class. Because of you, I now have a whole new way to ruin everyone's childhood. But also, hopefully, it's made this fairy tale even more relevant to people today. Now, was this subtext obvious to audiences in the 17th century? Probably not. You might say I'm reading too much into it. But stories reflect culture, even the parts that culture doesn't want to admit. And we're not done with Red yet. If you thought this was weird, buckle up, it's about to get wild.